Hello everyone, myself Dr. Tapush Kumar Pal and welcome to our channel Physiomax Organization. Under the part of Physiology, we are continuing our medical education, and in today's topic, we will be reading what are the different types of muscle contraction. Muscle contraction is of mainly three types. First one is the concentric, the second one is the eccentric, and the third one is the isometric. So among these three, the first we'll discuss about what is isometric contraction, and with the example we'll understand what is isometric contraction, followed by what is concentric and what's the eccentric contraction. Muscle contraction, it's of these three types, where the first is the isometric. So what is exactly the isometric contraction is? Isometric contraction is a contraction where there is a no change in the muscle length, but there is a increased in tone. If I just give an example, you will understand. Like if this the hand for the biceps when it's getting a contraction, and if this hand will give the resistance of the therapist or the opposite hand, it needed to be same in equal amount. Like if this hand will give a 50% of the contraction, this hand also will give a 50% of the contraction. There will be increase in the tone of the biceps muscle, but there will be no change in the movement. Without change in the movement, if you do the contraction, this is what's called as a isometric contraction. Next, we will understand what is concentric contraction. Consider this is the patient's hand and this is the therapist's hand. The time therapist's hand will give a pressure to the patient's hand, and if the patient's hand overcome the therapist's power, then that's will have a contraction. That's what is called as a concentric contraction. Now with the example, if I'll give, if this hand will give a 30% of the power, and if this hand will give a 70% of the power, and if this hand will resist or overcome this muscle hand's power, the hand will go for the contraction. This is what the concentric contraction is. And in the concentric contraction, there is a shortening of the particular muscle fiber which is about to get contract. That means for here the biceps is getting contracted, and here the biceps muscle fiber is getting shortened. That's why it is called as a concentric contraction. Now, if we take an example of a eccentric contraction, that's the most difficult and most power is needed for this eccentric contraction. And eccentric contraction is a type of contraction where there is a increase in the muscle power rather than the isometric and the concentric. The reason why we'll understand now. That first we'll understand what is the eccentric contraction is. Eccentric contraction, if this is the patient's hand or the hand which is about to move, and if the resistant hand will give a excessive power than the normal hand, then it is the eccentric contraction is. With an example, let us see. This hand is giving a power of 70%, and this hand, if it will give a power of 30%, the biceps is getting lengthened. And why what we are talking about the eccentric contraction? Eccentric contraction, it will give the maximum amount of power for the muscle. Example, if you are going for a uphill in the sense, if you will walk over the hilly areas, where the calf muscle or the gastrocnemius and the soleus, it used to go for the eccentric contraction, and that resulted there is a huge amount of power needed for the calf muscle. So we understood the three basic concepts of contraction: isometric, concentric, and eccentric. Apart from these three, there is another type of contraction, that's the isokinetic. Isokinetic is a type of contraction where the movement it will be but in the same velocity. Normally the isokinetic contraction or the movements cannot be done using a normal device. There is a different type of isokinetic device where the velocity is prefixed. Example, in a particular machine, if we do the movement throughout the time period, the movement it will be in a same velocity. For the first minute, whatever is the velocity, For the last 10 minutes, the same velocity would be maintained. And that is what's called as a isokinetic exercise or isokinetic contraction. So we have understood all the different type of muscle contraction. And that's it for today's topic.